I got an opportunity to go see Avengers Age of Ultron at the IMAX on Saturday. And I'll have to say that it was a very entertaining movie. It was a good movie. And I really enjoyed the film. It really captured the essence and the spirit of an Avengers comic book. And it was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed the movie. And I'm going to go into a bit of a review. I'm going to talk about what I liked and what I didn't like in this video. Now, Avengers Age of Ultron is the latest movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe started all the way back in 2008 with the first Iron Man movie. And from there, each because what Marvel Studios is trying to do is build a movie universe that's just like its comic book universe, where each movie is part of a larger story. And it started again in 2008 with Iron Man. It was followed up with Incredible Hulk, and I think it was Captain America: The First Avenger, and then there was Thor, and then I think there was Iron Man 2, and then that was followed by the Avengers, and I think that's the order. And then after the Avengers was Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor: The Dark World, Iron Man 3, and then Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and then the Avengers, Age of Ultron. And this installment, follows up on events that transpired in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and the opening sequence, picks up where that movie left off because I think what happened was Baron Strucker winds up with Loki's scepter, and the Avengers are going to go and get it back. And what they're going and the opening sequence is very beautiful. It reminds me very much of George Perez art from the late 1970s, and it really evokes that spirit of it. Because when I was looking at the pictures, cinematically, the detail, and the action transpiring in them, it evoked that spirit of those old 1970s comics. Because when you look at the scenes and you compare it to a George Perez comic, I think about from the Avengers, from issues now volume one, number, I think, what is it, 160 or so, to about issue about 200 or so. If you look at those panels and you compare it to the art, to the visuals on screen, it very very much evokes the spirit of that George Perez art. And I'd have to say that the cinematography in this film is very very strong, and that was one of the very strong points in this film, is that the cinematography is some of the best. And another strong point in the film is the characterizations. I mean, I can say honestly, as a guy who has read Marvel Comics since he was about 4 years old, the characterizations are pretty much dead on to a Marvel comic. Everything that you've read in an Avengers comic or an Iron Man comic or a Captain America comic or a Thor comic, everything is there. And even the other Avengers, such as the Scarlet Witch, the Vision, and Quicksilver, sound just like themselves in the comic. It's pretty much almost like being immersed in a comic book. And that is one of the strongest points. Now, I know this is an adaptation of a comic book. This is not, a comic book, but this is an adaptation, and there are, little nuance changes. But for the most part, it is one of the strongest adaptations I have ever seen, done in a live action format. And that is a very, very powerful strength to this film, in that you're seeing literally a comic book come to life, and that in and of itself is a feat when you think about the scale and the scope of putting together a film like this. And they do a very very good job of capturing the spirit and the soul of that Marvel comic and bringing that heart of that Marvel comic up on screen. And I really liked seeing that, in action. Um, and that's really one of the strongest points of Avengers: Age of Ultron, is that it really does evoke that spirit of that comic book. Now, again, the film was very enjoyable. The film is very entertaining, but the film also has its issues. And one of my big issues with the film was with the just incredible amount of story they tried to cram together. I mean, when I was watching this film, it was like watching like 200 issues of Avengers crammed into one 2.5 hour or 3 hour block, and that's a lot for anybody to take in. And I'm a guy who's been reading comics since he was 4 years old, and I kind of noticed that it was like they were trying to give us like almost every Ultron story from Avengers like 50 something when Henry Pym created Ultron, all the way up to about, I'd say, um, the Perez era issues, Bride of Ultron, all that other stuff. It was like they're trying to cram at least about 50 to 100 issues of Avengers into one movie, and it got a little overwhelming. I mean, they were just putting so much story in there, and there were so many characters that it was a lot of film. It was a lot of characters and a lot of stuff stuffed into one film, and it got a little overwhelming. And in some points, I was like getting a bit of a Schumacher vibe, with the Batman and Robin from '97. Now I don't. Now I'm not gonna say the movie was bad, but I was getting that kind of vibe from what I saw because there was just so much stuffed in there, and that it prevented the film from transitioning well and scenes moving organically, and it prevented the story from really being what it could have been, because they were just trying to put so much in there. I mean, you had the origin of the Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch. You had the creation of Ultron. You had the discovery of vibranium. You have the introduction of Ulysses Claw, who he comes in. That's going to be in the Black Panther movie later on. Probably going to be built up on. You have the creation of the Vision. You have so much, and then you later on in the credits you have that. And also you have the revelation of the Infinity Gems, a plot point that pretty much got lost. And a lot gets lost because Joss Whedon tries to put so much into one movie, and you can't really digest what you're watching, and that's a real weakness to this film, is that there's just so much and it becomes so overwhelming. And really, what happened with this film is that it's a great film, and it really captures the spirit of a Marvel comic, and it really captures the heart of a Marvel comic. But when you're doing screenwriting, it leads to people not being as multidimensional as they could be, because what happened is that most of the characters were here. Yeah, they were themselves and they were true to themselves, but they were kind of flat, and that really prevented the film's characters from being as multidimensional as they could be. They didn't have as much depth as they had in other films like Iron Man or the Captain America: The First Avenger, where we really got to see Tony Stark and Steve Rogers and really what made them great. In this film, everybody's kind of just like paper thin and kind of flat, and that's something that I really noticed. Watching this film, even the Ultron character um, was not as strong as it could have been because there just were so many characters, and everybody wanted screen time for so many characters, and that really prevented the film again from being what it could be. If I feel if they but it's kind of hard to do because there are so many characters that need to be in an Avengers movie. Because again, Avengers is based on a team comic, and in a team comic, there are a lot of characters. But when you try to translate that to film, it can be a bit of a challenge because once you go past a certain number of characters in a cinematic environment, it becomes a really really difficult challenge to really develop everyone and really give people that depth and complexity. And that was, one of the weak points in Avengers: Age of Ultron, is that it was very hard for the writers. I mean, Joss Whedon was the writer and the director, so it's hard for him to really develop anyone because everybody needs a certain amount of screen time, and the film wound up, just being overstuffed with so much content that it became pretty much overwhelming. I mean, yeah, it's an entertaining film, but it's a real flat film compared to other installments. And one of the reasons why it was so flat, again, is because you're trying to put so many characters in to a limited time space. And that was one of the things I noticed, as a screenwriter. And the other issue I noticed was, there was a lot of telegraphing when it came to, screenplay. Because the Hulkbuster versus the Hulk fight, that was the it just came to me like, because I'm a screenwriter myself, and it came to me as a telegraph plot point one, you know, and I just saw the plot point right in front of me. And when I went to the movie, I wasn't expecting to see that, but the screenwriter instinct just kicked in when I saw that scene, and I said to myself, that's plot point one right there. And it pretty much just sat there in front of me. I mean, it was telegraphed. Yeah, the one when the Hulkbuster beat the Hulk, I said, yeah, that's the end of Act One right there. And then when I saw, Black Widow getting captured, and then that I saw that as, I saw the plot points coming at me. And as a screenwriter, you're not supposed to be. The audience is not supposed to see that. I know I'm a screenwriter, and I can tend to see those things, but I wasn't expecting to see it. But that just showed me, the real weakness of this screenplay, because again, because Whedon was trying to stuff so much into one movie, and that those plot points really were telegraphed, and I wouldn't have expected that, from a film, because I've seen other films, like Terminator 2, and I didn't see the plot points, being thrown at me and coming at me, because, again, the script was very strong, and in a strong script, you really don't see it unless you watch it two or three times. And this time, on the first viewing, I'm in the IMAX theater, and I'm not expecting to see, these plot points coming at me so easily, and it really showed me, how weak this script was. And this script was a very, very weak one again, because there just were so many characters and so much going on that it was a bit of an issue. And I'm hoping that people at Marvel Studios, yeah, they make great stories and they stay true to their spirit of their films, but I'm hoping that they put a little bit more craft in their films cinematically, because Age of Ultron, yeah, it was a great entertaining movie, but it was pretty weak compared to other films in their cinematic universe. Just story just wasn't as strong as previous installments, on a cinematic level. I mean, it was entertaining, but on a cinematic level, on a creative level, it just wasn't very strong. And another issue I had was with those special effects. Yeah, they looked just like a George Perez comic, but in some sequences there were just too many of them, and they were overwhelming, and it was like having ADHD. So much is going on, your brain just can't process it all. I mean, sometimes you had two and three sequences of things going on, and it was just too much. And that was a big problem for me watching the film. I mean, even with the IMAX and the 3D, I couldn't even, because they were running trailers before the film, and I could see the 3D and see the difference between the 3D. But because so much was going on, I couldn't really process it all. It really wasn't as strong as it could have been, because when you're watching 3D, you really want to see the third dimension, but you can't see it because so much is going on. A lot of times it was reminding me of Michael Bay's Transformers movies. I can't stand those because, everything is so busy. And Avengers Age of Ultron, everything was just so busy. And, it's just like special effect after special effect after. It's not like your Terminator or your George Lucas and Star Wars, where the special effects really just blend in, and they show us something about a character, or they show us something that moves the story forward. This stuff was there. Yeah, it was really action packed, but it was a little overwhelming. It was just too much. And I really believe that less is more, because I use this in my own storytelling, and really this Avengers movie needed less of everything. I mean, there was enough here for, well, I'd say about four movies in content, and it was crammed into this film, and it was just a lot to digest. Now, I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm saying that it wasn't as good as it could have been, because there was just so much to take in. I mean, I know that Joss Whedon was trying to top himself in the first Avengers movie, but I don't believe in trying to top yourself. I don't believe in trying to give somebody something bigger and better. I believe, strongly in taking each story as its own and then letting the audience decide. And in the whole attempt to top the original Avengers, it just became a mess and it became very overwhelming. Just too big of a movie. And it became so big that, a lot was lost. A lot of story was lost. A lot of character development was lost. And the film was just not strong. And when you're doing screenwriting, it has to be a very strong script. Now, I have heard that, Joss Whedon was under a lot of pressure to make this movie bigger, but I really, again, believe in taking each story as its own and not trying to top yourself, because what I saw on screen was a really big attempt to, you know, top the first Avengers movie, and there's no topping another movie. Again, each film needs to be taken as its own. Each story needs to be taken as its own. Each story is its own independent entity, and that's a lesson I learned the hard way, because I was trying to do that myself with the Temptation of John Haynes here. I was planning on doing the sequel to this book. I'm still going to do it one of these days, but I wanted, because I always considered this would be one of the best books I ever wrote, and I really wanted to do a sequel to top it, and I said, no, you can't top it. What you have to do, because I'm building my own, literary universe, um, you have to take each story as its own, and each story has to be its own independent entity with its own plot, its own theme, its own beginning, its own middle, and its own end. And I didn't see that. What I saw was, yeah, I saw a comic book movie that was true to a comic book, but there were a lot of cinematic issues, like I said, I discussed previously, that really prevented the film from being a quality movie that would be incredibly memorable for years to come. I mean, the first Avengers was one of the best superhero movies in the genre, and the first Iron Man was one of the best movies in the genre. And I'd say Captain America is also one of the best movies in the genre, but there are a couple of other ones that were, they could have been better. And this Age of Ultron could have been way better, but the problem was just so much. And it was just so much content, and it just was so overwhelming that, unless you're a super die-hard comic fan, it becomes a lot to digest. And even me, being a comic fan since I was 4 years old, knowing these characters backwards and forwards like the back of my hand, it became a lot to digest in a 2.5, 3 hour adaptation. And it was really an enjoyable, again, it was an enjoyable film, but I really wanted to see, more on a technical level, on a cinematic level on this film. And I wanted, because the everything else was fine. The acting was fine. I'd say the directing was very good. Cinematography was beautiful, just very beautiful. Just like a good fusion of comic book action and good fusion of cinematic, comic book action and cinematic. It's a good translation of it, but there were just the technical issues with the screenplay, which was just overstuffed and just too many characters. Um, I'd have to say, screenplay was very much holding the script, holding things back, and it could have used another polish, another set of revisions. Because again, there was just so much content. I understand that you want to make this film better, but there just was so much content. It was just a lot to take in one sitting. And this is the type of film you're really going to need to watch at least 2, 3 times, because again, there is just so much going on, and the special effects, they are not the strong point of Avengers: Age of Ultron. I have to honestly say, it's like Michael Bay movies. It's just ADHD, just so much going on, so busy. Whenever I imagine things, when I have in my head for special effects and stuff, I imagine maybe one thing going on, because I really want the viewer to process, what's going on. In this film, it's like 2, 3, 4, 5 things going on at one time, and it can give you a headache if you're trying to process it all. And I found many sequences just to be very difficult to digest and get into, and it kept me from really, enjoying the story as much as I really wanted to go enjoy the story because I'm a big comic fan. I really enjoy comics, and I really like to see these Marvel Cinematic movies. But these issues are, well, while some people would call them small, they can really take away from what it could have been a really great film. And this is a good film. I'll say that much. I'll recommend it, and I'll say, go out and go see it. And I'll say go out and see it twice because there was a lot you're gonna miss in between those different scenes and different frames because everything is so busy and everything is going on so fast. And you really need to go see this movie at least about 2 or 3 times. I even recommend going to see to get the DVD. It is a great film. It is very entertaining, and you will have a good time. The kids are going to come out of it with a big smile on their face. It's a great film for the family, and in spite of some minor language and profanity issues. Another issue that I would have with it, um, with the film, but it's a very good film, very fun film. Um, Lots of action, lots of adventure. Um, and I really recommend everybody go see it because it is a good film, but I don't believe it's the great film it should have been. And I believe that if they just polished the screenplay a little bit and didn't put all that pressure on themselves and just took it as an independent entity, because that's what I do when I'm doing stories in the ISIS series and books like The Temptation of John Haynes. I try to make each story an independent entity with its own beginning and end. Yes, the events connect with each other, but each story, I take it from a creative approach as its own story, but just with the same characters in them. And each story has its own plot, and that really needs to be, the approach from Marvel Studios because it's going to take a lot of pressure off guys like Joss Whedon, and it's going to help them relax, and it's going to help them make and craft better stories because the craft on this film was not as the strongest as it could have been. I really came in, I didn't come in expecting much, but I didn't expect to see, all these mistakes that related to craft. I really wanted more from this movie. It gave me a lot, but I wanted more substance. I wanted more depth. I wanted a little bit more complexity, and I didn't see that. What I really saw was a really flat, shallow, you know, Cliff's Notes versions of Avengers and Ultron. I really didn't get, to the heart of it. And the sad part is, the heart of it really was Dr. Henry Pym, and he was sadly missed, in this story. I mean, Dr. Henry Pym was the creator of Ultron, and he based Ultron on his brain patterns. Now, I know in an adaptation, they had to use Tony Stark because Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr., is the box office draw, but the character of Henry Pym was really missed, and his inferiority complex and his inferiority issues, it really, again, I really took a lot of the substance out of the story, and I really wanted to see that type of depth in there because, you know, the that's what leads to Henry Pym having all these issues is that he does not feel like he is the contributing to the team, and that's why he created Ultron in the first place. Now I know that they adapted it, saying that Tony Stark wanted to create a shield to protect the world, but something kind of got lost in the translation, and then that really affected the heart and substance of the story. And I really again thought this could have been a much stronger film if they just took a little bit of time instead of trying to cram so much in there because there were a lot of deus ex machinas like the helicarrier towards the end that escorts that gets all the people out of the city. I don't know. Again, there was a lot of plot holes here, like Scarlet Witch reading Ultron's mind, and the helicarrier ex machina, as I call it, and War Machine popping up. And I'm going to deal with War Machine and Falcon in another video. Um, but these are all technical points, pointing to that really weak screenplay that really needed, again, another polish, another run through, another set of revisions. I believe this film could have been a lot tighter, and had a little bit more substance because they were just trying to put so much in that a lot of the substance got lost in the flash. And this is a very flashy movie, but don't come in looking for substance. It's just pure entertainment. It's like a popcorn movie. Again, it's something you'll really enjoy. But if you're in there looking for a little bit more depth and complexity, it's just not there. Again, I recommend that you go see it. And I recommend you go see it at least 2, 3 times because there's gonna be a lot of stuff that you're gonna miss. But it's not as strong as the other movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Um, you can find all my great books on Amazon.com. I have several books on Kindle Unlimited, such as Isis the Beauty Myth, um, Isis All About the Goddess, and Isis Wrath of the Cyber Goddess. These are all available on Kindle Unlimited. If you have Amazon Prime, you can get them for free. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. I put out at least 2 videos on Mondays or Thursdays. Just look out for them. And again, that's all I have to say.